Hi, this is Sandeep Ghosh bringing you another edition of the Ghosh Pot from San Francisco. Earlier this week, I attended two book discussions at the Commonwealth Center in San Francisco. The Commonwealth Center, if I were to draw roughly a parallel, it's a bit like our Indian International Center in Delhi, and the same kind of intellectual, the same kind of talking heads come there and discuss various political and non-political subjects. So these were two very, very interesting talks, I must say. The first was about the situation in the Supreme Court of America. This was by Michael Waldman. His book is titled Supermajority. He is the Brennan Center of Justice's chief. And the second one I attended yesterday was by Thomas Byrne et al., who is an opinion writer and essentially a columnist for the New York Times, old men. Uh, the interesting thing is there seems to be a general paranoia in America about the 2024 elections, whether Trump is going to make a comeback and to quote unquote use the term hijack the elections once again. Uh, and all the Democrats, if you hear them, there is, as I use the term paranoia, there is a great deal of nervousness. But the funny thing is, as I was listening to these two talks, I felt if I were to just shut my eyes, the arguments which I was hearing were very similar to the kind of arguments used by left liberals in India against Modi government. So if one were to replace Trump, you could easily put Modi's name there, and the arguments which were coming were exactly similar to what we hear of many of the opposition leaders, in particular, some of them who spend a lot of time in America and go and interact, what they talk about the BJP and Modi. And these two gentlemen, again, if I were to just try and put names on them, one was sounding to me like one of our very celebrated, what they call the distorians, distorians as in the people who have been trying to distort some of the history to suit their advantage. And the other one was a jurist, and who I can relate to a very senior Supreme Court lawyer who dabbles in politics and very involved in politics and has a view on every situation. Uh, so the point here is a lot of the arguments, while they were similar, I was finding the reverse is true. The gentleman speaking, Michael Waldman speaking on the Supreme Court, his worry is, he pointed out strangely, that the Supreme Court has been dominated by the right wing nominees for decades. And he quoted when last time there was a Democrat nominee who was a Chief Justice, or there was a majority of Democrat nominees of judges. In India, as you would say, many of us feel the situation is just reverse, because the justices who are playing, they are really part of, as we have seen, the second and third generation judges who are part of the earlier ecosystem, and very, very, as we see in their judgments, very, very left oriented. So there is, it's a situation which is inverse between here and there. But what I found interesting is, the kind of criticism he was saying there are, nine unelected officials who want to decide the destiny of the country, and he was warning against judicial activism, which he said might lead to a huge backlash, a political backlash, and citing instances from American history. Whenever there was, the Supreme Court tried to take over running of the country, in that sense, there has been huge pushback. Now, what you talk of running of the country, another thing he admitted that though you think that the judges are apolitical, but very often they are following the politics of the country. We don't see really that happening back in India. Now, talking to Ed Sauls, coming to Ed Sauls' thesis, he is clearly he has less probably problems with the Republicans, like some people in India has lesser problem with the BJP than he has with Donald Trump. He said very categorically, somebody asked him, who do you think is the biggest threat to American media? He, without batting an eyelid, he says Donald Trump. We hear similar noises back home when you talk to people, and there is really no argument you can do. It's all like I learned a new term from him. Is called effective polarization as opposed to just simple ideological polarization. Effective polarization is when, due to the polarization, you're trying to, you know, change the course of events. And there was some frank discussion over there about this polarization, due to which they say today the middle ground is being surrendered because of either side. If somebody is seen to be more bipartisan or moderate, he is immediately lampooned or pulled up by his own associates. So people are today very wary of taking a moderate stand. And that's again what we see in the political discourse back in India. And so, uh, you know, uh, you generally get a drift of what I felt. And what seemed to be, there is a very concerted or a orchestrated attempt that to counter this paranoia, not just in America, but these people who have been controlling the narrative. They are worried about a similar trend happening in rest of the world. And therefore, it's not a surprise that when we see there are, alignments of forces, or there are sponsors who are trying to, in their version, restore order by getting the left viewpoint, the left line of thinking and administration going in. And clearly, what comes out is that they have been used to dominating the discourse in countries and also dominating the governance. Therefore, today they feel disempowered and want to correct their situation. And because they're worried that there is the tide is not really in their favor, that's why the question comes out about the 2024 elections, what can happen and how you can prevent a return of Trump or the return of the stronger right wing political party. Now, this is something which concerns. And I was surprised by the kind of, conditioning which has happened when I tried to speak to some of these people offline. And I heard the kind of views they had, they're comparing the Indian situation with Turkey, for example, which was absurd. But I think people, some of our own people who are in the NRIs or academics, who are in the Ivy League schools, or as they say, the Washington Beltway think tanks, I think they have successfully driven such an impression or perception into among the American intelligentsia. Funnily, when Waldman was talking about the Supreme Court, he made a statement. He says America is the only large democracy which has a written constitution. And he said, I can't think of anybody else other than Israel. And he cited Israel's example about how, again, the conflict between judiciary and executive, what it led to. So after the talk, I did send him a question, which he didn't take or didn't reach him on time. So after the talk, I said, "You don't you think you missed out one country?" And he was very stunned. He said, "Which country?" I said, "A country with 1.4 billion people, a democracy, and which has a written constitution and which also has a Supreme Court, which has been rather decisive, including, throwing on prime ministers or disqualifying prime ministers from government." So he said, "But your court has now been substantially weakened." I said, that may be your opinion, but people are entitled to their opinion. That the facts are there. That the fact that we have a written constitution, a country is being managed, you cannot go away from there. But that's, you can say, the arrogance of American intellectual or academic. But the point, again, if you see the so called point about weakening of institutions, etc., has been driven home very, very, I think, pointedly and effectively. And that's where I think the Indian establishment has failed, or they have been blase, or to some extent, I may say naive, in not countering this. One can say that, okay, how does it matter what American academics, American media and others think about India? But I don't think in today's highly connected world, highly not just connected by way of information, internet, but connected economically and through various channels, this is something India can afford to ignore, be it not just for Narendra Modi, but for India at large. And those from India who are seeking the help of these so called foreign voices or foreign powers to achieve their political end in India, I think they are doing a huge disservice. I've got nothing against, as I've said before, people trying to democratically change the regime in India. But if you are finding that democratically it is becoming difficult, so how do you create an environment, atmosphere, and put hurdles by which you prevent the current regime from coming back? Just as we hear what's happening in America, when people are worried that a Trump may make a comeback, or the Republicans may come back, and so they are trying to put roadblocks, and in a very concerted, systematic manner to prevent that from happening. I think this is something people who are in the middle of the road in India need to reflect upon, think, and rather than get into this whole effective polarization, trying to influence outcome just by their ideological beliefs or their own set of biases or opinion about people. Thank you very much. I return back to India next week, and I'll probably give you some more updates from there. And the current scene, especially, I'm quite, what's happening in places like Maharashtra leaves me a bit flummoxed. I'm not too sure whether that's the right path BJP is taking, as people are always have said in the past that the Congressization of BJP could be its biggest undoing. But that I'll leave for a later episode. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and see you soon. This is Sandeep Ghosh signing off on the Ghosh Spot from San Francisco.